Welcome in, everybody, to a YouTube video here for the East Village Times. I am your host, Bryant. We are joined today by Trone of Aztec Breakdown, the Aztec Breakdown father himself. How you doing today, Trone?
Doing as good as we can after yesterday. We're in Vegas. We're gonna have a good time. Uh, but it is a bummer for sure after yesterday.
Absolutely is a bummer. Obviously, if you're watching this, you know what happened on Thursday. The Aztecs lost in the quarterfinal for the first time since 2007 against Boise State, 62-52. Was a very, very poor offensive game, was our second lowest points per possession output of the year. Did not do well on the boards either. Just a really rough game. Everybody I thought had a rough game besides Nick Boyd. I thought Nick Boyd played great in that game, quite frankly.
Mhm.
He got taken out a couple times due to foul calls that were a little ticky-tack. Didn't think he should have gotten foul calls there, but what are you going to do about the Mountain West refs, right? Nothing you can really do about that. The team just struggled altogether, in my opinion. We couldn't grab a loose ball. Coach Leon Rice said after the game in his post-game press conference that he thought they shot less threes than he wanted them to. He wanted them to take more threes
Wow.
than they took, and they took 40. So you kind of understand the game plan that he had going into it, that they want them to shoot threes, they want them to shoot early, and they want them to shoot often. Now, what I thought about that was that means that he saw something in our rebounding that he thought he could take advantage of taking as many threes as he did, because that's what our defense kind of makes a team do. We make teams shoot threes because how much we pack the paint. Now, maybe it was game planning for Guath because he saw Guath addressed, but he didn't see him in the game. So maybe that's what it was, or maybe that was the game plan, whether Guath played or not. Which it seems like after seeing that Guath wasn't going to play in the first half, if they were going to switch to a different game plan, they might have at halftime. But they said chucking the threes are working. Let's continue to do it. And it was quite embarrassing to watch, honestly, live, because our guys were just standing and watching the ball as it was going to the rim, weren't really getting in position, weren't boxing out. What were your thoughts on the game, Trump?
Yeah, it was rough, and it was the Aztecs were up by 5, I want to say, at the half. Uh, and
Yes.
things were feeling pretty good. It wasn't the prettiest half by any stretch. They were up by more than that, and then Boise hit a couple threes to close out the first half. I think the Aztecs were up by 11, and Boise hit a couple threes and kind of brought it back. Uh, and even throughout the second half, the Aztecs were up 47-45 with a little under 10 minutes left, and so things were going okay. And then they couldn't score over the last 10 minutes. They never made a single another field goal after that point. Uh, the defense overall was good. You talked about they shot 43s or 40 plus threes, whatever it was. Uh, and I think they only hit like 27% of them. And that was something Coach Dutcher said in the postgame show, was like, if you look at just the percentages that Boise shot, you would have thought San Diego State won the game because they
Exactly.
shot like 33% from the field and 27% from three or whatever it was. Uh, but it was the rebounding, a little bit turnovers, but largely just the rebounding. I think the Aztecs were like minus 12 in the rebounding battle. Um, and you mentioned that sometimes it seemed like the Aztecs are just standing around, and there's two plays I can think of off the top of my head. Maybe I'll try and clip them later, where uh, it seemed to me live like the Aztecs thought there either was or was going to be a shot clock violation. And on one of them, the buzzer even sounded. And it looked like they just kind of like stood there like, oh, shot clock violation. But the shot was off, and Tyson Degenhart just ran in and put it back in. Easy 2 points. And I was like, oh, that's like
That
such a
happened
bad. And
multiple times
it
yesterday.
was it was for
Multiple
sure at least
times.
twice. And in one of them, I think people were yelling at like Heidi specifically, um, which like he was at fault, but also everybody was at fault because everybody was standing there. I think it was the second time where the buzzer didn't go off, but still everybody stood there because it was like they played great defense for 29 and a half seconds, and the shot went off and it was a miss, but nobody tried to box out. Nobody went for the ball. They were just like, oh, shot clock violation. And then no, offensive rebound, easy 2 points. Uh, yeah, those were hard to watch. And especially when you think of that, like Boise State played Tyson Degenhart, who's a great player, but he was playing at center for a lot of the game, and he's done that throughout his career. But he's 6'8".
He's
Uh,
very
and the
small. It's
Aztecs
small
had,
lineup that they ran.
yeah, the Aztecs had JCJ. They had Miles Heide. Even Compton, Compton's only 6'7", but he should at least be able to match that with a 7 foot wingspan, or 7'5" wingspan, I should say. Like the Aztecs had bigs out there, and they just couldn't get the rebounds. And some of them were long rebounds that are just kind of there's not a whole lot you can do, because even if you do box out right, the ball just goes over you.
Exactly.
Um, but if you cut those rebounds in half, and especially those ones where they thought the shot clock is going off, maybe the game ends differently. And so yeah, it was rough, and it's I haven't rewatched the game because it's hard to do, but I plan on doing it and just taking some notes and seeing more specifically what was happening. But yeah, it was a rough game to watch.
It was definitely a rough game to watch. It seemed like our offense was kind of stagnant a little bit. We didn't really have a lot of set plays, and even when we got open shots, we just weren't knocking them down. I mean, BJ Davis struggled a little bit. I know he hit that 1 3 in the corner to start the game after the
Hmm.
one that freaking did a toilet bowl and rimmed out, which I don't know
Yep.
how that
Yep.
didn't fall.
Yeah.
Um, but he kind of struggled to in the game yesterday. He should have hit more threes. He had open looks. He couldn't knock them down. Miles Bird, I thought he had a good first half, but his second half was terrible. Maybe one of his worst halves all season. He couldn't get a shot to go down. He made a couple plays, getting some blocks and everything on defense, but it just looked like on offense, this team just didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. They were just running our normal motion offense that we usually do, and our bigs were not setting big screens. We kind of do a flash screen, and then our big kind of like doesn't really like roll to the basket. He kind of just flashes at like the free throw line. We kept doing that, but it wasn't working, and we weren't adjusting. The way that Boise State was playing defense, if you set a little bit of a harder screen on that guard and roll hard to the basket, I feel like we could have taken advantage of Boise State there, because the way that they were double teaming Boyd, you set that hard screen on Cardenas or whoever the primary ball defender is, and force Degenhart or force Stanley, force Buchanan to go out there a little bit more, and you kind of short roll, and then you have back cuts from Bird or Taj or somebody on that corner, we could have taken advantage of them. We just didn't do it at all. Everybody was standing around. Nobody was really cutting to the basket. It's just everybody was just watching the pick and roll and just hoping that the shot found them.
Yeah, I did think Boise did a great job at collapsing the paint. Uh, Anytime Boyd especially, but really anytime anybody got into the paint, they were surrounded by three or four Broncos players. Uh, and that usually the hope is that if that happens, you can kick the ball out and hit a three. But the Aztecs this year, especially since like the start of conference play, they just haven't been a great 3-point shooting team. Uh, and so the simple fixes aren't there as much. Um, Cutting definitely could have been better, but Boise definitely seemed like their goal was to like make things difficult at the rim, um, which makes sense. Uh, Bird, I think did he finish with 7 points? I wanted to pull up the box score before we started, but I couldn't. I want to say he
Yeah.
finished with 7 points.
Let me
Uh,
see if I
two
can.
two for 10 from the field. One of them was a three, but that's an effective field goal percentage of 25%, if my math is right, which is atrocious. Like an average player, you expect to shoot between 50 and 52. And so finishing at 25 for a player of Bird's caliber is really bad. His shooting efficiency hasn't been there for months at this point, it seems like. Uh, and I don't know what it is. And if he could get back, whether it's maybe he's hurt, that happens a lot of time with Aztecs players where they're hurt, but just it's not really reported and they play through it. And then we find out later. Um, so he might be dealing with something there. I don't know if it could be any number of things, but if he can get back into form, uh, this team can be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
But his shooting, he hasn't been scoring. And somebody else mentioned to me the other day, they were saying, uh, like, I don't know what Bird's role is offensively. And I was like, well, it's hard to have a role when your shots aren't falling. And
Yeah.
so it's tough. And then BJ Davis has been inconsistent. Boyd has been great for a while, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Boyd's been
they
amazing.
need some more offensive support there. And for one reason or another, it hasn't been there for a while. Um,
And like yesterday, I kind of thought when they continued to play Degenhart at center and everything, I really thought they were going to take advantage of that mismatch and have Heidi. I know they gave it to Heidi one time, but then Heidi traveled, and then after that, we didn't really go back to him. I feel like we should have gone back to Heidi back in the post because even if they double, I trust Heidi to kick the ball out, and it seemed like they were totally fine with Degenhart guarding him one-on-one. And we've seen Heidi, especially in these last couple of games, obviously he struggled yesterday, but the last like 4 games down the stretch, he was perfect from the field, a 17 to 17. Like his last miss, I believe, was like against New Mexico in the first half before his
Mhm.
miss against Boise yesterday. So I thought if we got back, went down to the post to Heidi or even JCJ, we only did it a couple times. And I feel like we should have go back down there because JCJ showed it at Middle Tennessee State last year. I know he hasn't shown it a lot this year because we haven't needed him to do anything like that in terms of being a primary scorer, but he has that. He showed it at Middle Tennessee State, and I feel like we could have used him a little bit more in the post when they went small, and we just didn't. We kept trying to run our motion offense, trying to get downhill, and like you said, they were packing the paint. And when they were packing the paint, we were just too late to kick the ball out to the three, or we weren't relocating to the spots where it was open. We were just standing still, hoping for our teammates to find us, and we just didn't do that.
Yeah, I thought Heidi had a few chances that he could have been more aggressive. Um, it's always hard to see like what the player is seeing, and I try to be cognizant of that before I get too critical. But I thought he could have been a little more aggressive for sure. I thought there were a couple times where it was like, Heidi, you can score here, and then he would pass it out or do something else. Um, yeah, it's it's a tough one. I've said that like 17 times now, I think. But
Yeah,
yeah, it was it
it's
was
tough
it was tough. It's tough watching your team basically not score for the last 10 minutes.
for like
Uh,
9.5 minutes in the stands.
and the team is a gritty team. And I think they still showed that, right? They were the same. They didn't give up. They didn't give in.
They still tried
Um,
battling back. They got to the free throw line and missed free
right,
throws. I feel like that
right.
should be an Aztec motto by now is we miss free throws down the stretch.
Yeah, it was a thing. I think regardless, it's been a fun season overall. It's been stressful at times, absolutely.
Absolutely.
The inconsistencies of the team have been frustrating for sure. But I still think it's been a fun season. And despite it, I'm still looking forward to if the team makes the tournament, fantastic. I'll watch that. And if they don't, they should be a shoe-in for the NIT, I would think. And I will watch that, and I'll be happy to watch the team for at least one more game.
Yeah, which moves us on to our next segment here is will the Aztecs make the tournament? Are we stressing the bubble? Are Aztecs fans stressing the bubble? Um, Personally, I've been looking at the metrics ever since we lost, been stressing about that, obviously. And when you look at the metrics, you look at top bracketologists over the past couple years, all of them say we're in. All of them say we're in, whether we're the last four in, whether we're the last four buys, no, whatever it says the Aztecs are in the tournament. Now, the committee and how they can go to the bigger conferences like North Carolina has a 1-11 quad one
Mhm.
record, and they are still on the bubble. That just shouldn't be a thing, in my opinion. I don't think if you're 1-11 in quad one, you should not be able to make the tournament. Um, I just I don't know. What are your thoughts about the bubble and everything? Should Aztecs fans should they be stressing? Should they be relaxing on Sunday because we're in as long as there's not a four bid Steelers? What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to just check bracketmatrix.com. Uh, they have, oftentimes more than 100 different bracketologists that post their brackets there, and it just kind of it's a conglomeration or whatever, and it just takes all of them and spits out the average, I guess, basically, position across all the brackets. And the last time I checked this morning, I don't know if it's been updated again since then. Um, there were, I think, 85 Maybe it was 87. One of the two. The specific number isn't important. We'll just go with 85. There were 85 brackets on there. 17 of them had been updated since the loss to Boise State, and the Aztecs position hadn't moved since before they played Boise State, which I think is what you would expect. You wouldn't expect if a team loses a quad one game to have their position change drastically. That's a good loss. It's regardless of whether it's like a loss you're supposed to take, it's still a good loss, quote
Exactly.
unquote. And so you wouldn't expect it to change. If they were in before the Boise game, which seemed to be the consensus, uh, then they would be in after the Boise game. I think, like I said, of the 85, 83 had them in. So it's a pretty safe position to be in as far as that goes. The question then becomes how many bid stealers are there? Uh, and
Exactly.
and and not even just bid stealers in the specific term, but how many teams that maybe aren't a bid stealer in the sense that they like win their conference, but just how many teams might leap ahead of the Aztecs. And so we're talking about teams like Texas would be one. They might be a team that even if they don't win the SEC championship, maybe they can jump in front of the Aztecs. Um, who was the other one? I was looking at North Carolina. You just
North
mentioned,
Carolina.
right? North Carolina, if they beat Duke today and Duke is without Cooper Flag, I'm betting, considering he got wheelchaired off the floor yesterday. And I think they were without another one of their star freshmen, too. I was watching most of the first half of that game and somebody else left with an arm injury. Uh, if North Carolina beats Duke, that's a big resume building win. They might not need to necessarily win the ACC
Tournament.
tournament
Yeah.
to jump in front of the Aztecs. Uh, and so how much does that happen? And so that's what we're watching. I don't know where the Aztecs would be at this point in time, so I don't know how many teams can jump in front of them and they'd still be safe. Um, but they should be okay, but it's still, I think I will be sweating it out on Sunday in the airport flying back home after this tournament.
Absolutely.
I will be sweating it
Absolutely.
out watching that selection show. The bright side, which is something I had totally forgotten about because as Aztecs fans, we're so used to success and making it to the postseason. I legit forgot the NIT existed.
Yeah.
And I know the NIT isn't what most fans want to be talking about at this point, sure. And I 100% understand that. But like I said a minute ago, they at the worst cases they're a shoe in for that. They'll be like a 1 or 2 seed in the NIT, and
Yeah.
I will be happy to just continue watching the team and watch the players grow, and then when the time comes, start looking forward to next year.
Yeah. I mean, the glass half full version of this is, let's say the Aztecs miss the tournament, right? They miss it by 1 or 2 spots.
Hmm.
Heartbreaking. Half glass full is you lost your star freshman against Utah State, where if you have Magoon Guath against Utah State, you maybe pull that game out because of how good we looked in that game. Obviously, we didn't score the last, I think it was like 3 minutes or whatever, and all Utah State's points, except for like 6, were on free throws.
Hmm.
But you have Magoon Guath in that game. Maybe you finish that out. Maybe you don't. But you have Magoon Guath against UNLV, and you have Magoon Guath healthy against Boise today, right? Or not today, yesterday. So you have Magoon Guath. You kind of think that the Aztecs either don't lose yesterday or they don't lose to UNLV. Obviously, it's kind of tough when you got guys that are hot. Maybe you don't lose to Utah State. But I feel like if you have a healthy Magoon Guath, the Aztecs don't lose to UNLV, I don't think, in my personal opinion. But doesn't matter. Didn't have him, right? And the other
Right.
part of it is you didn't have Reese Waters the entire year,
Yeah.
right? And Reese Waters, in my opinion, I wrote about it before the season. I thought he was going to be the Mountain West Player of the Year because I thought he was the best player on this roster. Thought he was the best player in the Mountain West. I do think he's that good. I do think if we had him, it would have made a big difference this year, especially in conference. Maybe we don't even lose against Oregon in the Players Era tournament. Maybe we go 3-0 there. Whatever it
Hmm.
is, I do think Reese Waters makes a huge difference for this team because he is that veteran that's seen a lot, been in a lot of big games. And whenever we went on these offensive droughts that we went on throughout the course of the year, I think having a senior like Reese Waters in the lineup kind of would have relaxed this team, especially when Birds was struggling in conference play and and he's been struggling right now. And when Boyd was struggling early on, I think Reese Waters in those time frames would have just kept the Aztecs afloat, and we would be looking a lot better right now if we had him. So that's the half glass full type of thing. Is we have Reese Waters next year. If Bird doesn't go into the draft, we have Bird next year. As of right now, we have Boyd next year. Assuming we keep everybody, this team's going to be a great team next year.
Yeah, and that is a big assumption. Um, talking about Guath, I think more critical of him than people would have liked to start the year. Um, and the big thing was like he's a great shot blocker, but he isn't getting very many rebounds. He's a 7-footer and he's getting like 3 rebounds a game, right? He turned that around in conference season. He was averaging over 6 rebounds a game in conference season. And so having a guy like him over the last few games, rebounding has been an issue all season. And having a guy like him last night against Boise State, does that cut their offensive rebounds in half? Maybe, right? It's we don't want to spend too much time playing what if games, but also I'm a historian and playing what if games is like a huge part of being a historian, right? By trade.
Exactly.
And so it's fun for me to do, but I try not to do it too much in like a setting such as this. Um, Reese Waters is definitely interesting because he's one of those guys that I mentioned earlier that they're hurt, but they kind of play through the injury. And we saw during the first 12 games last year, he was he was a beast offensively, right? There were people, Jaden Ledee is an All-American, and people were saying like
Reese
like
Waters,
Waters needs to take more shots, right? Even though we have an All-American on the team. And so then he gets hurt though during the Fresno State game, and it was never quite the same after that. And so I'm curious to see like who is the real Reese Waters. It's probably somewhere in the middle of that non-conference season and the conference season of last year. But regardless, it's still a good player. And if you have another good player, it gives you more wiggle room for if a player goes cold, like Bird right now, you have another player that can step up and do stuff, right? And then if Waters goes cold, maybe that's when Bird can step up again, right? We kind of saw that this year with Bird starting out hot and Boyd getting hot towards the end of the season. Um, yeah, the future, depending on who comes back, the future looks bright. Magoon will be the biggest question mark, I think. And obviously we want guys like Davis and Compton and Taj. Taj I've been so impressed with ultimately the way he's been like the point guard
agreed,
for the second units as a 6'5" wing with a 7-foot wingspan. That can be big time matchup problems if he continues to develop. Uh, but Goon will be the big question, and I know Jeff Grammer, the beat writer for New Mexico, caused a stir on Twitter where he mentioned Texas
that
Tech when Guath won the Freshman of the Year. Uh,
Aztec fans were not happy with that one.
I
To
I
say,
can imagine. I can imagine. I'm not on Twitter anymore, but I can imagine. And I when I heard about that, I was like, that's just Jeff. Like he's just
yeah,
making
that's
he's
just
not he
him
doesn't
making a joke,
like we
and
shouldn't get all up in our feelings about this, but like whatever. It is what it is. Um, but it's worth pointing out that like other teams are gonna come calling, right? Even if
yeah,
he's not in the portal, like tampering is rampant in the NCAA right now, and there is technically rules against it, but nobody really cares.
it's like
Um,
nobody checks, nobody like does anything. So
right.
kids are getting
And
called right
so I'm sure he's already been called by multiple high level programs. He said Guath said in an interview recently that his focus right now is becoming a pro. Uh, I don't know. I haven't seen him on any mock drafts. I haven't really seen him on any draft boards. So I don't know where he is
now.
in that nature. I don't know what likelihood he has of leaving to become a pro this year. He has the skill of being 7 foot. You can't teach 7 feet, right? So he has that going for him. Uh, but it'll just be a matter of he'll go through that process and see what they say. And then once that's done, he'll need to decide, is it better for him to stay at San Diego State and trust the coaches to keep developing him the way they have for the past 2 years? Can he, if he's on a team that makes a deep run next year, that'll help his draft stock. So does he think it's a team that can make a deep run next year, or does money talk? And a program like a Texas Tech for example, is losing JT Toppin. He's probably going to get drafted. And I think he made $1 million this year playing for them. Do they, jokes aside, do they legitimately call Magungwath to fill that role and pay him $1 million, right? Money talks, and it talks loud, and it's hard to get mad at a guy. If somebody says, hey, we'll pay you $1 million to come play for us, it's hard
Exactly.
to get mad at a guy for doing that. We're disappointed, absolutely. We have these parasocial relationships with these players. That aren't good, and it's totally okay to be disappointed in it, but it you can't fault him for it. And so that'll be one of the things as the season wraps up is who stays and who goes. But
You
it
know,
seems like we have a good core with Boyd, Waters, and Bird all saying basically they're either going pro or staying. That's a
yeah,
good start.
I think it's a good start to have that core coming back. Obviously, we will talk about it more when the season is over and we get more
Yeah.
answers and everything. We'll have a more outlook. Obviously, we already have a freshman commit in Tay Simmons. We've heard and seen good things about him with him at Heritage Christian out in Southern California. So we've heard and seen some things about him, but we'll talk about that more in a future video or a future live about the future of this program. And what is going to happen. Now, San Diego State fans that are watching this, if you want to keep this team together, obviously Mesa, if you haven't seen it already, Mesa has a campaign going. It's called Aztecs Reload, with a $500,000 mark that they want to hit. Currently, last time I saw, I believe the number's at 106,000 in donation, which has been really good. I think it's been out for less than a week now, maybe, or just at a week. For how long it's been out. So Aztec fans that are watching this, if you want to keep this team together, I would say get to Mesa, donate, go to Aztec Link NIL, purchase these players' gear. Make sure you let them know how much you support them and everything, but also you can't fault a guy for leaving if he's going to get big money. Dutcher said at the Mesa event at Novo this past Sunday before they went off to Vegas that colleges have been promising money and players haven't been getting that money.
Mhm.
So, and he said that we're not going to promise money we don't have. Whatever money we have, the Aztec basketball program, they are going to give to the players because the players deserve it. They believe the players deserve it. And Coach Dutcher and the entire coaching staff are asking Aztec fans to continue to support this team. We can continue to support this university and donate to this team. But that is going to do it for our little video we had today covering San Diego State's loss yesterday against Boise State, covering the bubble, whether we should be stressing or not. If we make it in, I believe we make it in, but that's going to do it for our YouTube video. Thank you, Trone, for hopping on. We hope to hear more Aztec Breakdown podcast from you soon, obviously, but thank you very much. I hope everybody has a great weekend and enjoy Selection Sunday.
Yeah, take it easy and go Aztecs.